The scream struck me like lightning. "Mrs. Laura, do not start that car." His son hit the brakes. I stood still. The man who was telling me this looked like a local beggar. Sloppy beard. Old cap, worn clothes. I had seen it several times, hanging around near the law firm. And even though anyone would have thought he was crazy, in his eyes I saw no delirium. I saw the truth. But before I told you how I discovered that my own son planned to kill me for money, I must take you to the beginning of this story. It was a grey October morning when the phone rang. The lawyer's voice froze my blood. "Mrs. Laura, tomorrow at 3 o'clock. Her husband's will be read." I hung up with a shrinking heart. It had barely been 2 weeks since I buried Andres, my 40-year-old partner. I got up from my favorite chair, where he used to weave while he read the newspaper. The house was hollow, too quiet. I went to the hall mirror. Well, there I was. 63 years old, white hair in a simple bun. Black wool dress that I had been wearing for years. She looked like a humble and widow. That's what everyone saw. But Andres always repeated, "Hello, Laura, people underestimate women like you. That is your greatest strength." For decades I pretended to be just the patient wife, while he was building a real estate empire. But in reality, he told me everything. Every investment, every account, every property. Today, what few knew was that together we accumulated $50 million. The night before the meeting, my son Marcos called me. His voice sounded unusually friendly. "Mom won't forget to use your car tomorrow. But with so much to think about, you could distract yourself. It is safer to go straight from home." That made me uncomfortable. Marcos never cared about my safety. The following afternoon, I took my keys and walked to the garage. But just as I was about to start the car, that man appeared running and shouted at me the warning that I would change. "Everything, don't look at me like that, ma'am, Laura," said the alleged beggar, as he gently held me by the arm. "I am not crazy. I am Ernesto. I worked with her husband for more than 15 years as a private accountant." I looked at him with distrust. His dirty clothes, the sloppy beard, the old cap. Nothing matched an accountant. But then he pulled an old phone out of the pocket. In the morning, on the screen was a photo. My son Marcos, crouched next to my car in the garage of my house, handling something under the engine. The date and time were clear. The night before, I saw it with my own eyes. Continued Ernesto, and I took the pictures because I knew what I was planning. Then her husband asked me to take care of her. If one day something happened to him, he knew that Marcos could be dangerous. I felt my legs. I remembered how Marcos had in everything. The night before I used my own car. Everything fit with terrifying precision. Why I would do something like this? I asked with a voice thread. Ernesto held my gaze. "Because believes that with you out of the way he will be the only heir." I saw him steal money from the company's accounts before her husband died. And if we face it with evidence, we'll lose all heir. I was missing. My own son had planned to kill me. To keep a fortune he didn't even know at all. I pressed the bag against my chest and took a deep breath. Today Andres always told me that I should never let myself look defeated. The moment you let your guard down, Laura, is the moment when you are devoured. Ernesto gave me a card. Here it is. The address of the lawyer her husband truly trusted. Don Armando Marcos. He and I have a plan in place. We call it Aurora. Andres left everything ready, in case Marcos tried something. I looked at him in disbelief. A secret plan created by my husband before he died. How far his suspicions went. I dried a tear that had escaped me. It was no longer time to cry. It was time to act. And you who listen to me, from which country do you follow my story? Write it in the comments. I want to know. I saved the cell phone, Ernesto in my purse, and I stopped a cab on the corner. Yo no. Was going to. Risking my life in a car driven by my own son. During the journey, my mind kept repeating Andre's phrase. Never let your guard down, Laura, not even in front of yours. Upon arriving at the office where the lawyer had summoned us, I took a deep breath and entered. Was to maintain the performance of a weak widow. Although my blood was boiling inside, Marcos and his wife were already waiting for me in the living room. Clara. Was he in a dark blue suit? With that golden watch that he liked to wear so much. She arrived wrapped in a red dress, too striking for the occasion. As soon as they saw me. Rose, Mom, I thought you were late, Marcos said with a smile that could not reach his eyes. I was just nervous, son. These procedures weigh on me, I responded with a muffled voice. Clara gave me a superficial hug, taking care not to tussle. For her I was never more than an uncomfortable procedure. Don Tomas, the official lawyer, adjusted his glasses and began the reading of the will. Marcos listened confidently, sure that everything would fall into his hands. And at first he seemed to be right. Was listed as a beneficiary of an account with $500,000. Then Clara looked at him with a twinkle in her eye and shook his hand as if they were already millionaires. But then came the twist. There is a special clause, said Tomas, pausing dramatically. If Mrs. Laura dies within 6 months after her husband's death, all heritage will be transferred directly to a charitable foundation. Silence was heavy as lead. Marco's smile froze, but cleared incredulously. I straightened up on the chair and stared at it. Fragility disappeared from my voice when I said, Your father was not a Marcos. He knew very well what kind of man he had raised. For the first time I saw the fear peeking into his eyes. Marcos tried to regain his composure, but his hands gave him away. Shivered on the table, but Claire instead tried to smile as if nothing happened. Although his eyes were looking for a desperate way out, the lawyer continued reading in a solemn voice. Each clause made it clearer that Andres had thought of everything. Marcos, far from being the great heir, would only receive limited amounts, and always under winter conditions. Nothing. No mansions. No complete companies, no open access. This cannot be, masked my son, on the verge of losing control. There must be an error. I intertwined my hands on the table and pretended calm. Inside I felt that the time had come. Marco's game was about to be exposed. I took my phone out of my bag and put it on the table. On the screen, the photos that Ernesto had shown me appeared. Marcos kneeling next to my car, manipulating the brakes in the middle of the morning. Clara let out a drowned sigh. What does this mean? Tomas, surprised. Means that my own son tried to kill me, I responded in a firm voice. And I'm not saying it. The evidence says so. Marcos got up all at once, tearing down the chair. This is a lie. Someone wants to sink me. No one needs to sink you, son, I replied coldly. You dug your own well. At that moment the door opened. Ernesto entered dressed in a suit, and with a folder in hand. No longer looked like a beggar, while he appeared arming. Andre's trusted lawyer. Gentlemen, he said in a clear voice, we are here to present additional evidence. For months, Ernesto has documented the suspicious movements of Marcos, and clear the room was in absolute silence. The papers began to pile up on the table. Bank records, transfer extracts, recorded conversations. Aurora Clara put her hand in her mouth. Pale frame. I could only look in disbelief. The trap had been closed. The Aurora plan devised by Andres before his death was going into action. The atmosphere in the living room was unbreathable. Marcos refused to look at the evidence on the table, but Clara watched him with horror, as if he only understood who he had married. And that's not all, added Armando while opening another folder. Hello, Mrs. Laura. Remember the dizziness and sting he suffered in recent months? I felt slowly. I had thought it was morning, or perhaps age. It was no coincidence. Ernesto continued in a deep voice. His son crushed pills of your own pressure medication and put them in his drinks when he visited her. The doses were not lethal, but enough to weaken it, to make it look attractive, and to prepare the ground for the accident. I felt a cold running down my back every time Marcos offered me a juice or a coffee at home. I did it with a fake smile. And me too. I received it gratefully. Wanted it to look like their heart had failed. He added, assembling. As happened with Andres, I hit the table with my fist. I just made up the rage. But for an instant, the weak widow disappeared completely. My son tried to poison me like a stranger, I said in a broken voice. Clara burst into tears. Marcos is true. You said that. He did not understand. Just bowed his head like a child dies in a lie. Andres suspected it. Said, gently assembling. That is why he prepared the whole plan. Rora Tomas knew that his wife must have a mirror. Against the greed of his own son. The room was silent. Tomas, the official attorney, he adjusted his glasses and said what everyone was afraid to hear. With this evidence, Marcos will not only lose any right to inheritance, you will also face criminal charges. Marcos raised his head, his eyes full of hatred. You set me up. Mom, you were always Dad's favorite. And now you want to destroy me. I looked at him with a shattered heart. There was nothing left of that child I lulled into my arms. In front of me, there was a man capable of poisoning his own mother. Tension in the living room could be cut with a knife. Marcos was breathing with difficulty. His eyes were desperately looking for a way out that did not exist. Then when he assembled. Andres' trusted lawyer rose calmly and curiously. Mrs. Laura, Andres asked me if this moment came to implement the last phase of the Aurora plan. With a gesture of his hand, the door opened. Two uniformed police officers entered with a firm step. Had been waiting outside from the start, ready to act. Mr. Marcos Rivas, said one of them in a dry voice, was arrested for attempted murder, fraud and poisoning. My son's face was transformed. First disbelief, then fury hit the table hard. This is a farce. I am your son. No one can arrest me for wanting what belongs to me. The officers held him by the arms. Marcos. Clara shrunk in the chair, crying without control. I stood up slowly, containing the trembling of my hands. No, Marcos. Your father's fortune was not yours. Was intended to protect, not to destroy. But you decided to betray us. He struggled, looking at everyone in anger. I wish you were a mom. If you prefer to get caught, worm, rather than sharing what is mine. I approached him until I stood in front of him. You are wrong. I always wanted to share it with you. But I never wanted to share my smile. Silence fell on everyone. The policeman took him out of the room in handcuffs, pressing on his broken pride. His scream screamed as he closed the door. Armando left the folder on the table. Andres planned it all. Knew that Marcos could become his worst enemy. and wanted to make sure that you were protected. I turned towards the window. The boy showed me a different woman. No longer the widow dyes of white hair, but someone who had survived the greatest of pains. Let it be discovered that his son was able to poison her and plan her death. With eyes fixed on the city, I understood that the Aurora plan was not just justice to me. That was the seed of a new mission. Protect others like me. Had been betrayed by their own children. That day, not only Marcos was taken prisoner, that day my true strength was born. Thank you.